Welcome back to Changing Austin. I am Stacy Armijo, and it's my honor to be joined by Jamie Herlich, Managing Director of Zach Theater. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, glad to be here.
So on this podcast, we like to talk about what has made Austin a unique and successful city up to this point, and look ahead and say what's going to make us a unique and successful city into the future. And I know you came to Austin in your current role just a few years ago, but you're not exactly new to Austin. Can you tell us a little bit about your vantage point?
Sure. So I have been visiting. My first trip to Austin was back in 2007 when my best friends at the time, still great friends, moved here. So I have been coming every year. I was very committed to my annual trip to see them since then, and moved here myself in 2022. So watched sort of over the 15 years that I was visiting, watched the city change dramatically from my vantage point, into a city that I really was excited to make my home.
That's exciting. So as you think about, as you say that, I'm imagining like a time-lapse video. Yeah, where you come to, it's like we look at a lot of the time-lapse videos of downtown especially, and you see the cranes moving and the buildings being built. So you actually got to see that in real life.
I did. I'm not sure that I had a full context of the geographic layout of the city, but my sense of the city shifted from being sort of a slower moving, laid back place where you just drink outside on a porch to something that actually has more of a forward moving and forward feeling energy and pulse.
And was there any particular time that you remember observing that in your visits, or was it just more gradual?
I wish I could remember exactly the year, but I think some of it was gradual, but I do remember a very distinct moment where I saw all the cranes downtown, and my friends were talking about how wild the change was for them as residents here. And at the same time, I was actually in Seattle. Seattle was going through its own evolution and growth, and there was a lot of identity crisis of the city and challenge from people who had lived there for a long time, feeling like the city was being taken away through some of the changes that were happening there. So I think I really related to it from a personal standpoint in a way that maybe others might not.
It was interesting. Another guest on our podcast, he mentioned having looked back in the Austin American newsletters, which is the precursor to the Austin American Statesman, and went back all the way to the 1800s. And apparently the theme of everything was better like a few years ago. You should have gotten here a few years ago. Apparently we've been saying that for around 200 years.
That's hilarious. Somebody told me, everyone will tell me that Austin was best the year that they moved here. So...
No doubt. Exactly. Yeah. Well, so you're in the arts world, and I know you came from you have a career in the arts.
Yes.
And you chose Austin recently. Is there anything about Austin's arts community that made it the right decision for you now?
Yes. The short answer is yes. I think anytime you're considering a major move and a career-driven move, you really want to think about both the organization that you're going to be working with and for and representing and putting your service hours into, but also the city that you're going to be making your home. And for me, that was a really important component of moving my family. Austin in particular has a reputation, as you all know, for being a creative city, a city where creativity is at the core of its values system and its identity. So for me, working in the arts, I want to be in a place that has a value to what I do and the mission and purpose for my being. So that was a big piece of it. But I think the other side, quite frankly, was the growth that's been happening here and the evolution and that sort of feeling that I was referencing earlier of the forward motion and movement of the city. That feels exciting to me, and it feels like an interesting problem to solve in terms of how a 100-year-old institution continues to exist for generations into the future, but also evolves in the city to make sure that it's still playing the role that it was founded to play.
And so there's been a lot of evolution at Zach.
There has.
So my first question about that, it is now Zach Theater ER, not RE. Correct.
Yes.
So I'm a former theater kid. Yeah, that I absolutely loved being in theater, and when I learned what it meant to be a thespian, I was very excited about that, and I joined the groups and did all the things. And so the theater spelling of RE to me sort of evokes one thing, whereas ER evokes a different one. I'm going to guess, since you made an intentional decision to change it, there's some meaning behind that.
There is. Many regional theaters still spell their name with an R-E. Theater.
That's like, you have to say it that way, right?
Theater. It's the British spelling. And I think it has been used in order to do two things, generally speaking. One is differentiate ourselves from movies. And the other is to elevate the art form in a way that would provide validation and prestige to the work that we were doing. Generally speaking, theater is sort of the most democratized and maybe sometimes perceived as the sort of lowest brow of all of the highbrow art forms. When you take in symphony and opera and fine art like museums have. So theater has always been sort of the scrappy, smaller, and sort of art form in a lot of places. And so I think we were trying to sort of elevate our stature and say, no, we are as valuable and as important as these other art forms. I think what that did over time was actually push people away, audiences away. And I know that many people have said to us, wait, how do you spell it? Why do you spell it that way? And the truth is, we don't want to push audiences away. We actually want to invite and attract audiences in. So what we were finding was that we were that spelling, which is such a small thing in some ways, but such a big thing in other ways, was really pushing away newer audiences, people who maybe didn't grow up being a thespian and knowing all of the intricacies of theater making that would be attracted to that. And we made a conscious decision to make a change, to make sure that we were more accessible, easier to understand. And we believe people are not confused about the difference between theater and movies, but
I think that's pretty well established.
Jury might be out.
Yeah, we're a few hundred years in now. I think we're good.
Yeah.
But, so as you think about, in my mind, branding changes like that can be perceived as, oh, well, it's a spelling of, it's two letters that are flipped, or it's a change in a color scheme, and what meaning is that really? And what I have found is often it's not so much about necessarily the way something looks as much as it is about illustrating what that means in terms of how the organization operates. And that hopefully when you make a change in your brand, that is reflecting or inspiring a change in your organization. How does that map to how you guys are doing that?
Yeah, for us, we did do a full rebrand, which included the respelling, new spelling of the word theater. We also have a very new look and feel. And in terms of the design, our logo, the way we talk about ourselves, it's very distinctive to people who are watching us from the outside, but also internally, it's been a big sort of realignment and convening mechanism for our organization. It was intended to do two things. One, sort of catch up to who we actually are. We built the Top for Theater, our third performance space, in 2012, and we're 13 years from that. Since then, we have grown in many, many different ways, and our programming has evolved and grown. Our impact has evolved and grown. Our budget has evolved and grown, and none of our look, feel, and identity language had grown with it. So some of this was really intending to make sure we were catching up to who we are and where we are, and also positioning ourselves for the next chapter of who we sort of aspire to be. And that's where making sure we're really throwing our doors open wide and inviting people in who love theater and know theater, and those who might be brand new to it, were all parts of the evolution of our brand.
It's interesting as we think about, Zach's been around a long time, right? And as you think about what perceptions of Zach have been previously. I know it was not long ago. I know there's a lot of children's programming, but in my mind, I thought, oh, well, that's a children's theater, and and it's really not anymore. How would you characterize it today?
Yeah, we are a professional producing theater, which means we make all of the art. That's really different than almost any other entity in the city that you might think about when you think about where do I want to see a show. One of the things that's really distinctive about Zach is that we pick the shows, their plays and musicals. We hire a director, we hire creative teams, we have full-time, year-round carpenters and painters and other folks on the production side to build the sets, build the costumes, rehearse the show, right? We end up hiring actors, both local actors as well as those from outside of the city, to then bring the show to the stage. So the whole process of creating the work is really different than, I think, organizations that maybe bring in work for you to see that's already been created. That is part of what we put on stage in terms of our productions, and we do that for adult audiences, youth audiences, and family audiences, everything in between. We also have a really robust education and training program, and that's both for the casual theater interested person and also for the very serious. So those who want to make a career in theater, there's an opportunity for advanced training. We have a really well-established advanced training program with 100% college acceptance rate for the last 12 years into very prestigious art schools. And we actually have a school at Zach. It's called Zach Academy, where we have students there all school year doing their academics online and then doing in-person performing classes. So lots of activity at the organization, both for adults and for students.
So you're creating and creating creators.
Yes.
That's the two layers. So as I think about, a lot of our audience is the business community. And I am... in Austin, we talk a lot about employment and workforce and recruiting companies to our area, driving the economic growth that we've seen over the last couple decades. And I think sometimes we don't necessarily speak about the role that the arts play in that particular cycle. And I was at an event recently where I was chatting with somebody about, how did your company come to be here? How did your job come to be here? And it was something like, we came here and we went to all these shows and we went to all these cultural installations and whatnot, and we just really fell in love with the city and then discovered it has, this whole entrepreneurial community to it and this really connectedness. And so I'm curious, can you talk about how you see the intersection between the Austin arts industry and the business community?
Absolutely. I think from a job growth, attraction of companies and their employees, I think that the arts industry and both the nonprofit and the for-profit industry sit really side by side with the environment and sort of parks and recreation. When you think about Austin, what makes people love being here, it's those two things side by side. When you're attracting employees, when you're looking for businesses to relocate, they need to make sure that the people that they're going to be bringing here or wishing to hire will want to live here. And those two things are really, really critical. I think if you look at cities where they maybe have more trouble attracting business, it's places that don't have enough to do to make it fun to live there. I had a friend recently who was applying for a new position and said he went to make for an in-person interview, and as soon as he got off the plane, he knew it was not the place for him. I won't name the city, but when he told me, I thought, why would you consider living there to begin with? But as soon as he got there, he said there was just nothing there. And it made me realize I couldn't imagine what my life would be, even though the job was really great. So I think if you think about all of those things for Austin, making sure we have a really healthy and vibrant arts community is really important for business. I also think that the arts are a business, and I think people often look at it as a nice to have or a hobby, but at the end of the day, artists need to make a living. There is a value proposition to the work that they're doing, and so really recognizing that the business model for the arts is also needs to be fed. And that's a whole maybe other podcast, but it's an interesting piece of this conversation around business is how we look at the arts as business as well, and also worthy of attracting and retaining in the same way that we do tech companies and others.
So in speaking about that intersection of the arts and business and arts as a business, and as we think about, we expect a business to provide a living wage that allows somebody to be a worker in that business, an employee in that business. And we expect that community to be able to be sustainable, and for the people who work in that industry to be able to live in the city that they are working in. So Amplify has, we do a lot of work around affordability. So as we think about, we've been in Austin since 1956. So our interest is, what does the next phase of Austin look like, and how can we bring the prosperity to everyone who is here as well as everyone who will come here? So how do we share that, and how do we walk that line of affordability? I would imagine workers in the creative industries are absolutely struggling with that. Do you have thoughts on that as a topic?
Yeah, for sure. I think historically, arts workers and artists have always been undercompensated. We used to refer to it as the passion tax, right? You do it because you're passionate about it, and there is a tax to that. There's an earning issue. And many people have continued to commit their lives to that because it's who they are and it's their value proposition. As things get more expensive, it gets harder and harder. And so I think we as an industry have worked really hard, as an institution that is hiring artists and creatives, we've worked really hard to try to keep up with and actually correct some of the underpayment historically that's been in our industry, and that correction has come with significant cost. So, and I would say many are saying we're not far enough yet, right? There's a lot more to do. There's a whole lot of ways that can be resolved. And I think it actually takes the entire community to do that. It means that there needs to be a real infrastructure assessment and a role for the city to play, as well as the institutions that hire artists, as well as the artists themselves. So it feels complicated, and I feel like your introduction hit the nail on the head. It's this waterfall effect of affordability that starts to permeate everything and creates a catch-22, I think, for many groups of people, including creatives and artists.
So we had Kara Hanahoka on the podcast from Good Work Austin, and it's interesting because what they're focused on is a similar dynamic, but for people who are in food service. And so as you think about, we have these sort of expectations and practices as it relates to how much we pay, in what ways we pay, what are we willing to pay, that have evolved over generations for a lot of reasons, but that don't necessarily map to the value someone gets. Like in Austin, we've got an amazing culinary scene these days. And it's like, do you want to believe that amazing restaurant you went to and you dropped a couple $100 sometimes on some very fancy dinner, do you want to be sure that the people who are working in the kitchen are actually getting a fair wage? You have an assumption about that, but is that really the case? And to me, it seems similar in the arts community. I was at a performance recently, and they had a sort of a debrief after the performance, and the performers were acknowledging that their company pays them for their rehearsal time. We feel very lucky to be part of this company because we're paid to do this. And the story was, because I get paid for my rehearsal time, I'm able to take PTO from my quote unquote day job and really focus on the show. And it struck me because I thought, that's kind of like me saying that, like, I need you to do all the work to get me this report, and I'll pay you for that minute that you spending the email to send me the report, but I'm not going to pay you for any of the hours that came before that. It seems like a mismatch.
It does. I think it's interesting when you talk about that, because there's different categories of producing theater. And I think, in Austin, Zach has the largest budget. We are the largest employer in the producing theater realm, and that does come with a responsibility to pay for rehearsal time. We have, as I said, year-round carpenter, a staff that are carpenters or painters that are making more than a living wage, I would venture to say, and have health insurance and things like that. And that has to be paid for somehow, right? So our business model is, as a nonprofit theater, is that we earn some of our income through ticket sales or class fees or charging for a drink at the bar or our parking lot, putting your car in our parking lot. And then we also have philanthropy is the other piece of that. And those things together are what actually allow us to maintain a commitment to the artists and staff that we support.
Well, and it seems unique in that if somebody who showed up to a show had to pay a ticket price to cover the entire cost of putting on that show, feels like you're not gonna be able to throw your doors wide open to everybody.
Right.
As you mentioned, that being able to walk that line of accessibility and inclusivity, while putting on a professional production and respecting the work of your artists and your craftsmen is a difficult line. For sure.
And we often say that your ticket price only covers half of the cost of producing the show, and that's true, and that's even at our highest ticket prices. We definitely do not pass all of the cost through, and the model is intended to allow those who can pay more to do so through a philanthropic donation. So it's important. It feels really important to have theater be accessible to everyone, to make sure that people are able to afford a ticket, to see the work and to be moved by the work. And there are ways that we have to make the business work in order to pay for it.
So as I think about, Opportunity Austin is, our economic development arm here in town. And I'm familiar with the work that they do from a recruiting point of view. But it's, and obviously organizations have an opportunity to invest in that. And it strikes me that this is another avenue of that. If you're thinking, okay, I'm a big employer here, I'm recruiting people from other places, I want them to come to Austin and be impressed with us and accept my job offer. And if investing in the arts organizations is something that gives us that energy so that when they get off the plane, they say, oh, instead of, oh.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, or recognizing also the value proposition of aligning with your values in terms of where your resources go. And I think that's individually, we can all look at ourselves and say, what are my values, and am I acting in a way that shows that? If someone didn't know me and just looked at my checkbook or my tax return at the end of the year. And I think businesses have the same sort of thought process potentially that can be put behind that. Where do you want your logo? What do you want your investments, your community investments, to say about your company and about what you value?
Absolutely. Well, we have one question I like to ask all of our guests, and that is, if you think back to what is it about the Austin heretofore that you feel like is part of our secret sauce that we really need to be conscious of protecting and advancing? And then on the flip side, what is one thing that you think we should be thinking about as we are evolving to our next stage of success?
In my opinion, the thing that makes Austin great and will continue to make it great is its creative, innovative energy that continues to propel it forward. And that feels really important to preserve. And that, as I have mentioned, requires a community, right? It requires institutions like ours to play our role. It requires city input. It requires businesses to participate so that that isn't lost somewhere along the way with all of the growth and change in the city. What was the second part of the question?
And the second part, my favorite, is to look forward. So as you think about that, if that's what we need to carry forward and protect, is there something new or different that you think we need to be thinking about looking ahead that, I'm a fan of what got us here won't get us there. Yeah. And so sometimes it's like, you got what needs to endure and what needs to evolve. And so is there something that you're thinking about, what does need to evolve that might be new or different in the next phase of Austin?
I think that Austin is a great city already. I really love being here. It's my home now. So with all of that said, I think it can continue to become and be one of the best cities in the country. I really, really believe that. There is so much future potential still that is unrealized, and that's really exciting to me. And I think it is going to require some really thoughtful cross-collaboration between sectors. I think I've mentioned it 3 times now, but that collaboration between government and corporate and nonprofit / arts and creativity is, I think, if all of those entities were represented and could envision where Austin is and what it looks like in 20, 30 years, it could be phenomenal. And that, for me, is something that I'm not sure yet is fully realized and happening. And I am hopeful that we'll be able to take that step as a city.
So the enabling structure that could create that collaboration.
Versus individualized efforts that have come together to create sort of a new Austin beyond what it was. I think working together, I'm a real believer in collaboration. This is a theater, a core element of theater making is collaboration. And so I think if we were to apply that same concept to the evolution of the city as a whole, it could be really amazing.
Well, I hope that as we do that, that people 20 years from now are going to say, oh, yeah, you should have gotten here a few years ago. It's, you know, it would have been so much better and every year thereafter.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.